Welcome to Defenders, the teaching class of Dr. William Lane Craig. Today, The Existence of God, Part 10. And for more information and resources, go to reasonablefaith.org.
We've been talking in the class about the Kalam Cosmological argument. We looked at philosophical reasons to believe the key second premise that the universe began to exist. And then last week we looked at the evidence for the beginning of the universe from contemporary Big Bang cosmology, which suggests that as you go back in time, the past is not finite, or not infinite, but rather the past is finite and comes to a boundary point before which the universe literally did not exist. And we ended by asking ourselves the question, well, is this standard model of the universe correct? Or more importantly, is it correct in predicting an absolute beginning of the universe? Well, there is powerful evidence in favor of the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe. We've already mentioned the red shift in the light from distant galaxies, which indicates that the universe is expanding, so that as you extrapolate that back in time, it goes back to this point of beginning, as the universe was denser than it is today. In addition to that, the abundance of certain light elements in the universe, like helium, for example, which is very abundant in the universe, indicates that these light elements were formed very, very early in the history of the universe, when the universe was very dense and very hot. And so the abundance of light elements, like helium, is supportive of the Big Bang model. And finally, in 1965, it was discovered that the entire universe is bathed with a background of microwave radiation, the same kind of radiation that operates in your microwave oven at home. And this radiation background is a vestige, again, of a very early, hot, dense state of the universe. And so on the basis of the redshift, the abundance of the light elements, and the microwave background radiation, we have good grounds for thinking that the universe is in a state of cosmic expansion that goes back to a beginning such as we have in the standard model. Nevertheless, we also know that this standard model is going to have to be modified in certain ways. The model is based, as I said, on Einstein's general theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of gravity. And the problem is that Einstein's theory breaks down when the universe shrinks down to subatomic proportions. This is usually referred to as the Planck time. If you hear that expression used, you'll know that it refers to this very early period of the universe during which the universe must be described by subatomic physics, not simply by Einstein's general theory of relativity. The only problem is nobody knows how to do that yet. We don't know how to marry general relativity with quantum physics or subatomic physics in order to have such a unified theory of gravity. And that will need to be done. Moreover, the expansion is probably not constant as in the standard model. It's probably accelerating and may have gone through a very super rapid expansion in the past during a brief period of time. But none of those adjustments which will need to be made need to affect the fundamental prediction of a beginning of the universe. In fact, since Friedman and Lemaitre's work back in the 1920s, in which the standard model was first proposed, scientists have proposed scores of alternative theories over the decades which are aimed at trying to avert the absolute beginning of the universe. We've seen the steady state model, oscillating models of the universe, vacuum fluctuation models of the universe, inflationary models of the universe, ekpyrotic models of the universe. All of these have been tried and failed to avoid the absolute beginning of the universe. Put more positively, what we can say is that any non-standard model which is viable, which is tenable, involves an absolute beginning of the universe, not an infinite past. Now, that beginning may or may not be a beginning point. But even in theories like Stephen Hawking's no boundary proposal, in which the beginning is rounded off, the past is still finite, not infinite. The universe still comes to exist at some point or at some time in the finite past, even if it doesn't do so at a sharply defined point. In a sense, the history of 20th century cosmology can be seen as a series of failed attempts, one after another, to try to avert the absolute beginning predicted by the Standard Model. Unfortunately, the impression arises as a result in the minds of laymen that the field of cosmology is in constant turnover with no lasting results. It seems like every other month features a new cosmological model on the cover of Scientific American magazine. But what the layperson doesn't understand is that this parade of failed theories only serves to confirm the prediction of the Standard Model of an absolute beginning of the universe. That prediction has now endured through over 80 years of incredible advances in observational astronomy and creative work in theoretical astrophysics. In fact, something of a watershed appears to have been reached in the year 2003 when three very famous cosmologists, Arvind Borde, Alexander Vilenkin, and Alan Guth, were able to prove a theorem which shows that any universe at all, which is in a state of cosmic expansion on average throughout its history, cannot be eternal in the past, but must have a past space-time boundary or beginning of existence. And what makes the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem so powerful is that it is independent of any description of the universe prior to the Planck time. That is to say, it doesn't depend on having a quantum theory of gravity for its validity. Because we don't yet have a physical description of this early era of the universe, it has been fertile ground for speculations. In fact, one scientist has compared this to the regions on ancient maps, which are labeled, "Here there be dragons." You can just fill them with all sorts of imagined fantasies. But the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem implies that whatever physical description we come up with for that early era of the universe must have a beginning at some time in the past. In fact, the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem implies that even if our universe is just one of many universes as part of a grand multiverse, still the multiverse itself must have an absolute beginning. So that even on the multiverse theories, it turns out that the universe began to exist. Vilenkin is very blunt about the implications. Here's what he writes on page 176 of his book, Many Worlds in One. I quote, "It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place," and he's referring to the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, "with the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning." End quote. Now, we can fully expect that new theories will be proposed, attempting to avoid the absolute beginning of the universe. And these theories are to be welcomed. We welcome attempts to falsify the prediction of the Standard Model. But we have no reason to think that they're going to be any more successful in falsifying that prediction than their failed predecessors. Now, of course, it hardly needs to be said that scientific results are always provisional. But nevertheless, it's pretty clear which way the evidence points. Today, the proponent of the Kalam cosmological argument stands squarely within the scientific mainstream in affirming the second premise of the argument that the universe began to exist. Any question then about that subject? Yes, let's have Joe over here, if we can wait for the microphone to get to him.
Can someone go to your book to look at commentary on the list of failed hypotheses?
Yes, these are discussed in the book Reasonable Faith, in the chapter on the existence of God, where I go into some more detail. If you want really extensive discussion, look at the article that Jim Sinclair and I did in the Blackwell Companion for Natural Theology. Sinclair is expert in the area of cosmology, and he surveys an even wider range of models and more recent models attempting to avoid the beginning, and shows how these cannot be extrapolated back to an infinite past. So Reasonable Faith, and then also the Blackwell Companion article. Yes, Jonathan.
Yes, specifically on the Bortooth-Vilenkin theorem, I've got some friends in tech that I've talked to about this, and of course, the first question is, well, show me the article, show me the proof, and I've looked all over our databases, and I cannot seem to find their writings. I can't find it, even in the physics database. So,
really?
Any idea what article?
Well, yeah,
you
can find the citation in Reasonable Faith of the article. It's in the archive on the web, or it would be in the Blackwell Companion, where there's extensive bibliography. Most of this material is available on the web. Scientific results are so current that published paper journals now serve only archival purposes. The most recent work is always put out on these internet archives. And so the web addresses are given where you can find this. I've read the article myself. And so it's footnoted in Reasonable Faith or in the Blackwell Companion.
Thanks.
Dr. Craig?
Yes.
This is an article I've had in my Bible for a few years. I don't know. It was just interesting to me at the time. I didn't know it was ever going to be in this class, but it says, new theory stars exploded into the universe. Let me just read this. I didn't date it, unfortunately. But it said, in the most distant observations yet by the Hubble Space Telescope, some astronomers think that they are seeing evidence that the universe emerged from its initial darkness in a dawn of light that came up like a thunder across the cosmos. The light of the first stars apparently did not wink on gradually here and there. That had been the accepted thinking. Instead, the new and surprising view, the first starlight burst forth in a spectacular profusion. If this proves to be true, many theories of the early history and evolution of the universe may have to be revised. I won't read all of it. Okay. But it's very interesting that these scientists who have something like the Hubble telescope, and they look and they say, well, gosh, what we said don't work. It's amazing to me that they're so smart, but they won't just check what's written in the book. They ought to read the instructor's book here that says this is how I did it.
Well, now, I think it's important to understand the Bible isn't a science textbook. It doesn't intend to teach science, though I think it's consistent with science. And that article, I'm not sure what they're getting at, because starlight doesn't appear until later in the history of the universe, once the stars have had a chance to form, where we're talking about the very beginning of the universe before there were any stars. So that the stars would come sometime later after they've had a chance to form. Yes, Robert.
There was a special on the National Geographic on the Hubble telescope the other night, and they talked about the special photograph they took of the universe where they kept the Hubble stationary for like 9 days. And it was an empty spot in the sky, and it turned out that there were literally, trillions of stars. And so when we look at the size of the universe, which is trillions and trillions of stars and suns and the planets, yet in our Bible, the Scripture, God tells us that mankind is the crown of His creation. So, I mean, it's kind of a, in one sense, it's it's honoring to the human species. In another sense, it's kind of depressing when you think of that you've got all that out there. But I guess my main point is that since the revealed Word of God, He says that we are the crown of His creation, then in all that space out there, then that must be it. Would you agree?
This is an interesting point to which theists and non-theists react very differently, I've found. Non-theists look at the expanse, the enormity of the universe, and humankind in comparison to it seems an insignificant speck, just nothing. And so it means that man is worthless. He's just an ephemeral dot on the history of the cosmos. The theist, by contrast, looks at the enormity of the universe and thinks with the psalmist, "What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him?" It gives you a sense of the condescension of God, that He would care about us and send His Son onto this little tiny planet to die for us. So for me, when I contemplate the enormity of the universe, it magnifies my sense of the greatness of God and the extent of His condescension in reaching down to save even me, that insignificant little dot down there named Bill Craig. So maybe people have had concepts of God which are far too small. Maybe the enormity of the universe can help to expand our concept of God in a way that is more worthy of His greatness and His majesty, and to realize how condescending He is to care about us and to save us. The other thing, though, that needs to be said, I think, is what I mentioned, I think it was the Sunday before last, when I said the worth of mankind is not measured by size. You don't measure the moral worth of something by how big it is. And if we are made in the image of God, as the Bible teaches, we are persons, just as God is personal. And therefore, one human person is worth more than the entire material universe taken together, because it's just matter. Now that's an awesome, incredible thought. One single human person, the most ignorant peasant, the homeless person, a little baby, that one person is worth more than the entire material universe taken together, because that individual is a person in God's image rather than just a collection of atoms. We're not just a bag of chemicals on bones. We are persons, and therefore are, as Jefferson says, endowed by our Creator with intrinsic inalienable rights and moral value. So I see the greatness of the universe as something that it could expand our vision of God, but also something that is really quite irrelevant to our worth, which is determined on moral grounds, not on one's size. And the last thing I think that one might want to say about that is that the human brain is the most complex structure in the entire universe. When you take all of those trillions and trillions of galaxies together, there is nothing in the universe as complicated as a single human brain. That's how complex and well-designed we are. And so that intricacy, that complexity in a microcosm is, again, something that's awe-inspiring as well and sets us apart from the rest of creation. Any other comment on this scientific evidence for the beginning? Yes?
We hear about all the science and how the evidence for creation, and yet trying to get that into textbooks or as even a possibility is under such attack. And how do you, I mean, it seems to be a disconnect between what we hear out in the world and how we...
Well, I don't think so. I think what you're thinking of there is the creation-evolution controversy, which cannot get into textbooks. But see, that's talking about the origin of life on this planet and the evolution of biological organisms on this planet. What we're talking about here is astronomy, the origin of the universe. And this is in the textbooks. I mean, you pick up any textbook on modern astronomy and astrophysics, and you'll see a discussion of these various theories of how the universe originated, and they'll talk about steady state and the redshift and the expanding universe and things of that sort. This is
but
in
not
the textbook.
intelligent design.
No, and I'm not argued here for an intelligent designer. That's important to see. Although this is a Sunday school class, what I've been talking about the last couple of weeks isn't religious. The statement, the universe began to exist, the second premise of the Kalam Cosmological argument, is a religiously neutral statement that you can find in any astronomy and astrophysics textbook. This isn't creation science or intelligent design or anything of that sort. Now, I think it has theological implications, which we'll draw later on, but the fact that the universe began to exist is a theologically neutral scientific claim that doesn't presuppose the existence of God or anything, and therefore ought not to be objectionable in textbooks. Although I noted with some amusement a few years ago in the Arkansas creation trial, Judge Overton's decision said that the statement of the creation of the universe out of nothing is an inherently religious statement and therefore can't be taught. And I was amused at that because that's precisely what modern cosmology teaches, is the creation of the universe out of nothing. Unless you think that a creation is a loaded term theologically, but it's often used in a neutral sense in astronomical discussions. So that judge, I think, simply got it wrong. Yeah, Susie.
Question. You said on this theory there that it's accelerating?
Yes,
Why?
yes. The most recent evidence indicates the expansion is actually speeding up rather than slowing down.
Seems logical it would be slowing down. Why is it accelerating?
It's because there is a kind of anti-gravitational or reverse gravitational force that kicks in at a certain point that rather than pull things together the way gravity does, it pushes them apart. And this force becomes operative when the density of the universe drops to a certain level, and then this kicks in, and the acceleration takes place, the expansion actually speeds up. This is a discovery that's only been made since about 1998, and really was quite unexpected. Yes, Cindy.
Who first coined Big Bang?
Good question. This name, the Big Bang, was a derisive term for the Friedmann-Lemaitre model, which was coined by Fred Hoyle, the famous British astronomer. Hoyle was the proponent of the steady state theory, and he thought that to say that the universe originated out of nothing implied the existence of God, which Hoyle, as an atheist, just could not have. He thought if you got a Big Bang, you got a Big Banger. And that was unacceptable. So he propounded the steady state model. And he derided the Friedmann-Lemaitre model by saying that it teaches a universe originated in a Big Bang. And the name stuck. And that's what everybody refers to it as, even though, as I explained, it's really a misleading term, because it makes it seem like the universe is an explosion from a central point out into nothing, and it's not that at all. Any other question? Well, we've been looking at the evidence for the beginning of the universe from the expansion of the universe. Now, as if this weren't enough, there's a second scientific confirmation that the universe is not infinite in the past, but had an absolute beginning, and this comes from the field of thermodynamics, and in particular, the second law of thermodynamics. And so we will look at that evidence next week.
The copyright for the content of this recording is held by Dr. William Lane Craig. For more, go to reasonablefaith.org.